Story 1. Happy New Year, everyone. I thought I'd start 2025 by sharing a story from a sleepover with my cousin, someone I am no longer in contact with. This tale, although frustrating at the time, is something I can laugh about now. It was 2021, and the pandemic had technically ended in my area. My little cousin, let's call her entitled cousin, was someone I considered my best friend at the time. We spoke almost daily during the pandemic. She had been quite upset about not having a birthday party in 2020, and I sympathized because I had turned 13 that year and missed out on the big party my family had planned. In 2021, her mother, entitled Mom, came up with the idea of throwing a party to make up for the previous year. Entitled Mom had legally adopted entitled cousin's older sisters, whom she fostered when they were preteens. Despite technically being the youngest sibling, entitled cousin was mostly raised as an only child. The sleepover began with a rocky start. I arrived late due to a disagreement with my mom over washing my swimsuit, which delayed us further since our electric car needed to charge. By the time I arrived at my cousin's house, it was 8 p.m., and everyone else had been there since 5 p.m. Understandably, entitled cousin was upset. But after I explained the situation, she softened a bit. My mom dropped me off, and we joined the rest of the group, 4 girls around 12-13 years old. Red flags appeared early on. None of entitled cousin's actual friends had shown up. Instead, the other girls were daughters of her mother's friends, who barely knew her. They were polite to her, but mostly interacted with me. Entitled cousin decided we'd all do face masks. But the mood soured when she began criticizing everyone's skin, suggesting they use specific products. Her mom, who overheard, barely intervened. The rest of the evening was uneventful, save for entitled cousin forcing me to eat a mug cake she made, which wasn't particularly pleasant. The next day, we prepared for a trip to the water park. Breakfast was chaotic as entitled cousin demanded orange juice with little regard for manners. Once we arrived at the park, we noticed that none of our extended family showed up, a second red flag. While waiting for the gates to open, we entertained ourselves by pretending to act like entitled people, inspired by stories we had seen online. Entitled cousin didn't appreciate our creativity, storming off to spend time with her niece. Eventually, the gates opened, and the group tried to enjoy the day. Things escalated at the water park. Entitled cousin pushed another girl to be first in line for the water slide, citing her birthday as justification. Later, during a race in the pool, she scratched and bit my leg to slow me down. I was shocked but chose not to escalate the situation. The day turned dangerous when entitled cousin pushed me into the deep end of a pool, knowing I wasn't a strong swimmer. Fortunately, a kind stranger rescued me. When confronted, entitled cousin brushed it off, claiming she was just having fun. Her mother remained unaware of how serious the situation was. Happy New Year, everyone. I remember this story about a sleepover with my cousin, who I no longer have contact with. So, to start off 2025, I want to share this long, drawn-out story that I now laugh about. Back in 2021, the pandemic in my area had technically ended. My younger cousin, whom we'll call entitled cousin, and I were best friends. Throughout the pandemic, we talked almost every day. She was pretty upset about not having a birthday party in 2020. I sympathized because, in 2020, I turned 13 and missed out on the huge party my family had planned. Her mom, whom we'll call entitled Mom, came up with the idea of hosting a party for her in 2021. Entitled Mom raised entitled cousin as an only child because biologically, she is one. However, entitled Mom had previously adopted older sisters through an adult adoption process when they were 12. Those sisters, in their late 20s to mid-30s at the time, didn't live at home anymore. So, while entitled cousin was legally the youngest child, she grew up mostly as an only child. On the first day of this eventful sleepover, I arrived late due to a disagreement with my mom about a swimsuit. The swimsuit incident isn't crucial to the story, but it sets the context. My mom insisted the swimsuit needed washing, though I knew it was already clean. Adding to the delay, our car needed charging, which took 45 minutes. Entitled Mom's house was 25 minutes away from the charging station. I finally arrived at 8 p.m., although everyone else had been there since 5 p.m. because they lived nearby. When I walked in, one of entitled cousin's sisters greeted me. Entitled cousin was understandably upset about my late arrival, but after I explained, she softened. My mom left, and we got goodie bags from entitled cousin. There were 4 other girls at the party, and I was the oldest. My cousin was turning 12, and her friends were all 12 or 13. The first red flag was that none of entitled cousin's actual friends were present. The other girls were daughters of entitled mom's friends, who had only met my cousin a few times. While they were polite to her, it became apparent that they were more interested in talking to me. The night began with entitled cousin leading us to the bathroom for face masks. Initially, everyone was excited until she started making inappropriate remarks. She told one girl she needed to use a specific face wash because her face didn't look the best. I intervened, saying that wasn't nice, but entitled mom, who overheard, said nothing. Another girl declined the face wash, explaining she had sensitive skin. Frustrated, entitled cousin turned to me and said, "You also need this because you're starting to look like a witch with all those pimples." I was dealing with a medical issue that caused severe acne, so her comment stung. Entitled mom finally stepped in and told her to apologize, though the apology didn't feel sincere. The rest of the evening was uneventful, aside from entitled cousin forcing me to eat a mug cake she made. We eventually went to sleep watching the live-action Lion King. The next morning, chaos erupted during breakfast. Entitled cousin decided she didn't want the cereal entitled mom had prepared for everyone. Instead, she demanded fresh orange juice and scrambled eggs with cheese. When entitled mom explained they didn't have orange juice, entitled cousin threw a small tantrum. Eventually, she settled for water, but grumbled the entire time. After breakfast, we got ready for the main event of the weekend, a trip to a water park. As we waited for the gates to open, I noticed another red flag. None of our extended family, whom entitled cousin had claimed would be joining us, were there. Instead, it was just our small group. While waiting, the other girls and I decided to entertain ourselves by pretending to act like entitled people mocking over-the-top stories we'd seen online. Entitled cousin didn't appreciate our humor. She glared at us and stormed off to spend time with her niece, who was also present. When the gates opened, we entered the park and tried to have fun, but entitled cousin's behavior only worsened. At the water slide, she insisted on being first in line because it was her birthday weekend. When one of the other girls tried to go ahead, entitled cousin loudly declared that it was her special day, forcing the girl to back down. Later, during a race in the pool, entitled cousin scratched and bit my leg to slow me down. I was so stunned that I didn't even react. I let it slide, thinking maybe she was just overly competitive. The situation took a dangerous turn when we moved to the deep pool. I'm not a strong swimmer and had stayed in the shallower end. While I was near the edge, entitled cousin suddenly shoved me into the deep water. I panicked and began to struggle. Thankfully, a kind stranger noticed and pulled me to safety. When I confronted entitled cousin about it, she laughed and said, "I was just playing." Her mom brushed it off, too, saying, "She's just a kid, don't overreact." By the time we returned to their house, I was done. I stayed polite but avoided entitled cousin for the rest of the day. That night, while everyone was asleep, I called my mom and asked her to pick me up early the next morning. I didn't tell her about the pool incident over the phone, but I hinted that I wasn't comfortable staying there any longer. She agreed without pressing for details. The next morning, as I packed my things, entitled cousin tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was ruining her birthday weekend by leaving early. I apologized but stood firm. My mom arrived shortly after, and I left without looking back. That was the last time I willingly spent time with entitled cousin. Over the years, our relationship faded. Looking back, I realize how toxic her behavior was, even for a kid. The whole experience taught me a lot about boundaries and the importance of standing up for myself. Story 2. Arkansas has well-known laws that lean heavily on the side of the property owner. which leaves the renter pretty vulnerable to owners who want to be difficult to say the least. Or at least they did when I lived there. I doubt much has changed since. So I move into town and find a 2-2 apartment, intending for it to be a short period of time while I scout the town and look for a more permanent place. As for paying rent, they wouldn't or couldn't take an automatic monthly check from my bank or charge my debit card monthly. It had to be a paper check from me, with a 4-day late fee window. I hate writing checks, and I had the cash, so I paid out the 12-month lease all at once. I found a great place about 6 months later, thinking I'll just break my lease and pay the extra 1-month penalty and walk away from my apartment. I call and let them know I'll be moving out. Long conversation short. The way the lease is written makes you think that's how it works when in reality, at a second or third read, I'm still liable for the entire 12-month lease, and to break the lease essentially adds a 13th month worth of rent money. Knowing that up front, why anybody would break a lease is beyond me. So at this point I've already made the deposits on my new place when all this comes to light, so I'm stuck with 2 places. I tell the apartment complex I won't be moving out, figure I'll just go ahead and let the lease run out, set the AC to 80, and open the breakers to keep costs low. I slowly move my stuff to my new place since I have plenty of time now, and in the end, I leave behind my ironing board and iron just to leave something, and I never really use them anyways. About 2 months later, I got a call from the power company asking if it's okay to transfer power into somebody else's name. Shocked, I reply, absolutely not. While laughing a little on the inside, I decided to give it a day before I called the apartment complex. First thing the next morning, I get a call from the apartment complex, and with a super snarky entitled tone I hear, "We need you to drop the power from your name so the new tenant can take over and move in." I explained that I still have an active lease on the place and can't fathom why they'd rent it out. She accuses me of abandonment, and therefore she is allowed to rent the apartment. My reply went along the lines of, "I rent that apartment with the sole intent of having somewhere to iron my clothes. Did you not see my iron and ironing board there?" She said she did, and she took it to the office to get it out of the apartment. We go back and forth on the semantics for a little while. I let her know that I'm open to receiving a refund to the date on the new tenant's lease, and at that time, I'd be happy to drop my name from the power. She refused, and the call ended with getting her boss's number from the corporate. After mentioning to her boss that I can recognize a breach of contract when I see it, and that nowhere in the lease does it say I actually have to live there, not to mention her employee admitted to entering my apartment and stealing items of mine from inside, she quickly assured me they were putting a check in the mail that day refunding my money to the first of that month, and told me I could go to the office to pick up my iron and board anytime. Yes, I know they could have run up the power bill, but they'd only be able to do so much really, and a few days isn't that huge, and they didn't do it anyways. Even if they had, it would still be worth the expense considering the refund. Story 3. Sit back, relax, and get ready for the ending, because it is a revenge served cold and stormy. The events in this story happened in 2006 at a youth shelter I lived at. Here's the story. Note, the names used in this story are not the real names of the people involved. I used to have issues with some guy who I'm gonna call Nick. Nick was an utter weirdo who would do whatever he could to get a negative response out of me no matter what it was. On one particular occasion, the idiot threw some stink bombs in my bedroom, and they went off. The stink bombs didn't bother me in the slightest, as I have no sense of smell. I was more curious about the packaging. If it's anything else like before, I would just throw them away like it was regular trash. I decided to pull a prank to get him back, but knew it required assistance and perfect timing for it to be pulled off. The perfect storm. I woke up early one Saturday morning because I could hear the rain hammering down on the roof and on my windows. I really like storms because of the heavy rainfall, the crash of the thunder, and the lightning zipping across the sky. I had noticed Kylie, a friendly staff member, Corey and Daryl, two cool guys who disliked Nick as well, talking to each other in the living room as they were watching the news. I asked Kylie if Nick was up yet, and she said, "I'm going to wake him up after I've finished with my coffee." I asked Corey, Daryl, and Kylie if they'd be willing to assist me in pulling a prank on Nick, and they all said, "Yeah, sure, what do you need us to do?" I was ecstatic that this was my chance to get payback. The pranking begins. Guys, I want to pull a prank on Nick, and I need all of you guys to play along with the prank in order for it to work. What do you need us to do? I want you guys to dress in your school uniforms. I will dress in mine. This is the only way for this to work. Trust me. What do you think us wearing our school uniforms achieve if there's nothing else to the prank? I chuckle and tell him, I already got it planned out. Okay, as soon as we are in our uniforms, we get Kylie to wake up Nick, and I will tell him a story that will convince him to go to school. I will need you to back me up by saying, "Yeah, I remember seeing that on the TV last night. We got no choice but to obey the government." I doubt this will work, Kylie tells me. Well, this is what I will say to him. Nick, we saw a news broadcast last night after you went to bed. It was the Minister of the Department of Education. The minister said, as of tomorrow, students will be expected to go to school 6 days a week to ensure our children get as good an education as possible and prepare them for the future. Do you think that would be enough to fool Nick into going to school? I asked them. Corey gives me a wry smile and says, I think that will suffice. I like it, Daryl confirms. And Kylie? Are you in? Sure, I'll play along. I'm tired of his antics anyways. Corey, Daryl, and I get our uniforms on and wait outside Nick's door. I give Kylie the signal that we're ready to start the prank. Kylie unlocks Nick's door and I shake him awake. What are you doing in my bedroom, and why are you guys wearing your uniforms? You know it's Saturday, right? Nick asks us. Yeah, I know. Look, the thing is, we saw the news last night, and the head of the Department of Education told us that we have to start going to school 6 days a week now. We don't like it either, but we have to go to school, and so do you. Okay, I'll get ready. Yeah, I remember seeing that on the TV last night. We had no choice but to obey the government. Corey and Daryl tell him. Nick gets his uniform, takes a shower, and gets on his bike to ride to school. We watched as Nick rode his bike off the patio, down the driveway and down the street. Kylie, Corey, Daryl, and I run back inside the house, and we start pissing ourselves laughing. Several minutes later, we got a phone call from Nick. He said, I looked in the car parks and there were no cars. I looked through the office windows and nobody was there. I even knocked on several classroom doors and nobody answered them. Can you please come and pick me up, Kylie? Kylie smiles and says, it seems Nick is at school and realized he was the only one there. I got to pick him up. I can't believe he fell for that. Several minutes later, Nick stumbles in, utterly drenched by the rain, and I say to him, that's payback for the stink bombs, you bloody weirdo. After that, Nick never tried to prank me again. Story 4. I was walking home from a friend's house, and on the way back, I was walking close to the curb, but not exactly next to it. I wasn't focusing since I was listening to music, and suddenly, I saw a car go onto part of the pavement, and the side mirror hit me in the gut, and it hurt bad. I was trying to catch my breath by leaning on the wall opposite, and that's when she stepped out of her car, showing all her ugly glory. The conversation went as follows. Entitled, Mother, what do you think you're doing? Me, coughing, you hit me with your car. You broke my side mirror, you have to pay for that. You went onto the pavement, hit me with it, and you expect me to pay. That's when she walked up to me and punched me in my gut. Right where she hit me with her car. Punched me multiple times, rings and all. I swear I coughed up blood. She then noticed my phone and tried to take it. If you're not going to pay, I'll just take your phone and bracelet as compensation. This crossed the line. My phone is one thing, but my bracelet is another. That bracelet holds so much value to me. The bracelet is one that I got from my parents while they were in Tunisia, and it says my name in Arabic. I love this bracelet. I resisted as much as I could, all the while screaming, and that's when I saw another woman, who will be known as Hero, push her away from me. Entitled, Mother, he took my daughter's phone and bracelet from her. I saw her daughter in the car. She could not be older than 8. Hero. I saw everything. My hero turns to me. Are you okay? I think so, although I did cough up blood not too long ago. What's your name? I told her my name. I'll call an ambulance. My hero turns to the entitled mother. I suggest you leave before I make you. But, now. The entitled mother left. I went to the hospital. I didn't have any serious injuries, but she left a massive purple bruise on my stomach. While at the hospital, Hero said that she took a picture of her registration plate and will report her to the police. We exchanged phone numbers, and she stayed with me until I could leave the hospital, which was late last night. Still feeling in pain, but it's not as bad as what it was. Edit 1. I spoke with Hero about details and went to the police station with the evidence and information we have and locate the entitled mother. Said that if we could get a court case sometime in August, late July at the earliest. Once a date has been confirmed, I shall let you know. Edit 2. I got a call from my local police station. The entitled mother has been found, charges were pressed, and got a confirmed court date being August 7th. We've both been to the station for separate interrogations, and Hero will be accompanying me as my key witness. Apparently there are others as well, but I'm not sure who they are. Story 5. Back when I was in high school about 3-4 years ago, I rode the school bus to and from home. I actually was on good terms with the driver, as for the first few years he drove the route. He brought his young kid and toddler with him every morning. While the 2 boys sat behind him, I would sit either in the seat across or behind and entertain the 2. The boys loved me, and I always greeted the driver with a smile and greeting. Of course, the morning ride was nowhere near as crowded as the afternoon. It was so bad that students who rode had to have a bus pass sticker on their student's car for their bus. Reason being that riders would bring their friends on, or some kids would just hitch a ride. So, if you didn't have the pass, you couldn't ride. Even still, the bus was crowded as heck, to the point where there would be 3 to a seat. This will tie in soon. So, one day the new girl came on. When I first saw her hop on, I didn't think anything of it. That day, I was carrying my backpack, my gym bag, which was carrying my normal clothes, since gym had been my last period, and my clarinet case. It took up a fair amount of space, but I didn't really have a choice. Sitting beside me at that moment was my sister's friend, who I had let sit beside me because the bus was starting to get crowded. We were making small talk when the new girl came up. Note, the new girl had claimed to be an anti-bullier, someone who will stand up for someone else, as she put it. Now, I don't remember the exact conversation, but this is the gist of it. "What are you doing?" she asked. Look at all the stuff you have," she points to my 3 things. "How can you take up this much space?" She then points at my sister's friend and says, "She barely has any room." My sister's friend actually had plenty of space. She was a small girl, and I tried to explain that, but it fell on deaf ears. "You move out. I'll fix this," she told my sister's friend. "Wait a minute," I tried to talk, but she cut me off and pushed my sister's friend over to another empty spot. Then sat her heavy self beside me and shoved me in. I'm not being rude. She was on the heavier side. "Hey, stop squishing me," I told her. She of course ignored me, and then went on a rant about how I was bullying my sister's friend and how I was so self-centered. This continued on for the first half of the ride. I tried to ignore her at first, but she would yank out my headphones, shove me, yell at me, the works. This all from the girl who claims to hate bullies. My temper was beginning to rise, and it finally hit a breaking point when she said, "And this is why you don't have any friends." That's when I finally snapped. Let me give some backstory. You see, I was a bit of a loner, but not really by choice. I'd always been the weird kid, so the other teens generally ignored me. Though, I had a lot of boys pick on bully me. Pre-middle school, I would throw a fit, run off, and/or tell a teacher, but little would come out of it. In grade 7, I finally had enough, and when some kid picked on me, I just dropped a textbook on his head. Gave him a nice goose egg. Anyways, the point is that after that, if someone picked on me and ticked me off enough, I would swing. And being a tough-built girl who played baseball in the summer, I had a good right hook. Most of the boys backed off after grade 8, and I cooled off a bit. But there would still be some dummies, so I would still swing. Problem, I had never hit another girl. Never. Only because I never really got into the same fights I would with the boys, so I had more respect for that gender. So, back to the story. The new girl had pushed me past my limits, and I finally lost it. With all the strength I could muster, I slammed the heel of my palm into her jaw, smearing her makeup and shoving her out of the seat and onto the aisle floor. I started screaming at her, crying, "You're nothing but another bully." That rattled her because she got really mad after this, though I think she was still in a bit of shock. Thankfully, the cool driver I talked about at first stepped in. He stopped the bus and turned off the intercom. "Could you please leave her alone? Go sit somewhere else, now, or I will leave you right here," he told the new girl. She listened and slunk off. But I was in tears, crying into my hands. I couldn't understand what I had done to deserve that. I had never interacted with her till then, and I hadn't gotten into any fights since she first came to the school. Some of the kids around me asked if I was okay, but I was too hurt and ignored them. When my stop along with my sister's friend and a few other kids came up, I was already flying off it, across the street and into my house. When my mom came home from work, she found me curled up on the couch, crying my eyes out. When she calmed me down, I told her what happened, even showed her the makeup smear that was still on my hand. Mom told me to go clean it off, and then headed down to her computer. When I joined her, she had her email pulled up and was already typing in the CERT's name. A CERT, or Special Education Resource Teacher, is a teacher who works with special needs students, ranging from mentally disabled to troubled teens. My school's CERT was Mr. B, everyone called him that, and he was really cool. I got along great with him, and he was on my side for all the fights I ended up getting into. When I asked my mom what she was doing, I was a little surprised. She wanted to email Mr. B about what happened. And to be honest, it made sense. Yes, I hit the new girl, but she had instigated it. Normally, when one student hits another, they are the ones who get in trouble. But in this case, we could make it work in my favor. So, we sent off the email, detailing what had happened and how the new girl had started it. When I came to school the next morning, I was called into the principal's office. The new girl was there, and she was fake crying. "She hit me," she says. The principal looked ready to punish me. When Mr. B walked in, he sat beside me and gave me a small smile. The principal went on a rant about how my behavior was unacceptable and how I needed to apologize. Like I was going to apologize to that which... At the end of the rant, the new girl looked smug. But then Mr. B stepped in. "That may be, but I want you to look at this." He then set a printed copy of the email Mom had made, with the timestamp and everything. You see, she was just defending herself from the new girl. We also have witnesses with her sister's friend and the driver, as well as a few other students. By that point, the new girl looked shocked. I guess she couldn't believe that I had told someone first about what happened. Needless to say, the new girl ended up in some deep doo-doo with the principal for lying and bullying another student. We never really interacted after that, outside of a few incidents, and when I graduated with honors, I never saw her again. Story 6. So, I think this is halfway between being correct to post here and correct to post in I don't work here. I'll let you decide, but I think you'll understand my choice of sub. Also, I have to be quite vague with details because reasons, and provide the following disclaimer. The statements made here are my own and do not represent any party with whom I had or have a working affiliation, in the past or currently. This was posted on my own time, using only personal devices and private resources, nowhere near any company or customer facility. It is my belief that nothing posted here is in violation of any agreements between me and another party. The opinions stated here are my own. The company I was working for at the time of this event made things that were installed on airplanes. I was on a work trip to visit a customer. It was a fairly long flight, made to seem 3 times longer because I was in coach class and only a few rows from the rear of the plane. A couple hours after the meal service, the flight attendant was walking through the cabin making small talk with the passengers that weren't sleeping or watching movies. He got to me. "So, have you ever been to the destination before?" "No, first time," I answered. "Oh, are you on vacation? Which places do you plan to visit?" "No, I'm actually going to X city to meet your X specific team to work with them on some activity with our product. One of my colleagues is traveling with me as well. He's over in seat number X." "You work for X company? Come here." Mem, thinking internally, "Oh no, why did I just say that?" He walks me over to a crew-only area and starts asking a bunch of questions about crew-only things. The aircraft is in the air with paying passengers on board. I didn't have the specific license that allowed me to casually brush a fingertip across any crew-only device, much less to actually push a button to do X function while passengers are on the plane. It's iffy even if the plane is parked on the ground and doesn't contain a single passenger or crew member. Even if I did have said license, I would need specific advance permission from certain authorities that work with or for the customer. But if any part of that device were off the airplane, well, I still technically can't really touch it, except under certain circumstances, as long as it remains property of the customer. But I have been trained in live operation of that device, and did it for another customer. Yeah, kind of confusing, but international regulations. So, back to the conversation. Well, I'm not at all authorized to touch this while the plane is in the air, and I don't have permission or authority to do so from your company. I'm not even authorized to tell you. That's someone else's job in my company. But if I could, what I would do is I verbally explained the sequence of operations. You mean like this? Does what I just explained. Exactly. Oh, great. What about question A, B, C? Well, again, I'm not authorized to do anything with this device, but if I could, answer A, B, C. I believe this is all in the crew training documentation your employer should have given you. They take our documents and turn them into your company's training guides. Yes, but the instructions in the guides are not always clear, and we don't always have time for hands-on training when the way the device works changes. But I get it now. Thank you. My pleasure. I go back to my seat. There weren't really any movies I wanted to watch on their TVs, so about an hour later, I was browsing the duty-free catalog to fight off boredom. The flight attendant, seeing that I was browsing the drinks, asked, "You want something to drink?" "Yeah, I would love to." "How about X drink?" It was a premium drink that was in the catalog. "I've never tried it." "Oh, that's too bad." The flight attendant walked away. 10 minutes later, he walks back down the aisle. He had gone up to the first-class seats. Very discreetly, he places a glass on my tray table of the drink he asked me about. Sweet. I savored it for a half hour and thanked him afterward. Just before we landed, out of nowhere a children's entertainment pack from the first-class cabin came flying through the air and landed on my tray table. Same thing happened to my colleague. Okay, so maybe it wasn't so bad that I theoretically answered a few questions.